Yeah, so this is Locke on Education, Persons, and Moral Agency by Ruth Boeker, published in the International Journal of Philosophical Studies 31. And as always, feel free to ask questions. Let me know. Like, oh God, you're going to see if they've tried turning it off and on again? Yeah, I mean, come on, people. You should at least know this much. What is this? Abstract. Whatever. Okay, so here we go. The second chapter of Anique Waldo's book, Experience Embodied, focuses on Locke's experiential persons. This chapter brings together Locke's account of education, which he develops in some thoughts concerning education, with his views on persons, personal identity, and moral agency in the essay concerning human understanding and other works. Waldo's chapter makes important contributions to Locke's scholarship, since the question of how Locke's account of education provides a basis for his account of persons and personal identity has not yet received sufficient attention. Who was Locke and how are they important to the philosophical world? John Locke was very important. I can't actually give you a good enough explanation because I'm not a good enough historian, but like, you want to like read up on John Locke. Here we go. This is John Locke. Close. And so let's blah blah blah. Here we go. Yeah, so he was an English philosopher physician widely regarded as the most influential Enlightenment thinkers and commonly known as the father of liberalism. Considered one of the first British empiricists following the traditions of Francis Bacon, Locke is equally important to social contract theory. His work greatly affected the development of epistemology and political philosophy. His writings influenced Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and many Scottish Enlightenment thinkers, as well as the American revolutionaries. His contributions to classical republicanism and liberal theory are reflected in the United States Declaration of Independence. You're not going to get someone who's less influential in the history of Western philosophy, really, unless you go back to a more You're not going to get someone more influential in the history of Western philosophy until you get like to really huge names like Aristotle. But like, yeah, he's massive. So yeah. Unreal says he was kind of the original British empiricist, did a lot in political philosophy too, big defender of private property. Yeah, I remember a long time ago, maybe I was still in school, maybe it was after, but it was like someone was arguing that Locke was just like shilling for the rich people, like to make, so he would get more funding for his research, being like, oh yeah, private property, that's what's good, you get to keep all your private property. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. But this is just I have no idea if that's true, that he was really just, shilling for the aristocracy at the time. But yeah, remember that thing. Anyway, we're talking about, education, personal, and moral agency now. So apparently it's something has not yet received sufficient attention. So like this sort of Locke's position on this. Main contributions of the chapter. So this is a book chapter. Let me start by briefly summarizing the core arguments of the chapter. Waldo's chapter is rich and insightful, and in the following I will not have the space to reconstruct all our arguments, but rather will focus on some of the core themes of the chapter. In section 2.1, Waldo carefully examines what role reward and punishment play in the education of children. Locke, as Waldo makes clear, opposes the use of corporeal punishment in the upbringing of children. For instance, he writes that, quote, beating then, and all other sorts of slavish and corporeal punishments are not the discipline fit to be used in the education of those those we would have wise, good, and ingenious men, and therefore very rarely to be applied, and that only in great occasions and cases of extremity. End quote. I was just thinking, I want to see if I can be very flourishy in my writing if I want to be. I want to, every so often you want to have like this sort of like old school flourish. We don't really do that nowadays. I need to find a way to do this sort of flourish, only in great occasions and cases of extremity. I want to be able to do stuff like that. I got to think about this in terms of my rhetoric. Locke is critical about the use of corporeal punishment because it would instill the wrong type of motivation in children if it was used. Children would act out of fear of bodily pain, and this, Locke believes, would hinder their proper moral development. Waldo draws a distinction between two classes of rewards and punishments. On the one hand, there are There are those primarily working through the body. There are those primarily working through the body. Rewards of this type include sweets such as apples or sugar plums, or other treats given to children that increase their bodily pleasures, while punishments of this type include corporeal punishment and lead to bodily pain. Waldo notes that in order for rewards and punishments of this first class to succeed, a rather simple motivational structure seems to be sufficient, one that requires little more than a rudimentary form of episodic memory triggered in the face of similar situations and the capacity to act on effective drives and desires. On the other hand, rewards and punishments of the second class cause pleasure and pain by feeding certain experiences and ideas into the conception of ourselves as agents. Rewards and punishments of the second class operate through a more complex motivational structure, namely the anticipation of esteem and disgrace. Okay, so now all of a sudden we've got like a social theory here. We've got like how you are being treated socially is how you are, like if you're being rewarded by a corporeal punishment, you are being disgraced in front of your peers. So like there's a social aspect to getting beaten because you're beaten in front of other people. So that's kind of interesting. So the idea that beating, like the rewards that are just like candy are good, but like that's not so social. But if you're getting like disgraced in front of your peers by being beaten, that adds an extra dimension to things. Yeah. Okay. Waldo acknowledges that esteem is a kind of pleasure and disgrace a kind of pain, but her point is that in order to feel this kind of pleasure or pain, it is necessary to shift our focus from the objects that elicit pleasure or pain to ourselves and the way we are seen by others. Yeah, so we've got like some theory of other minds going on too, a social theory. This shift, so Waldo argues, makes it possible for us to become conscious of ourselves and someone with valuable moral qualities. According to Waldo, Locke's esteem-based education plays a particularly important role in the moral development of children because it makes it possible to shift attention towards the development of mental capacities that enable us to see ourselves as persons or moral agents. Okay, so that's interesting. And so you are trying to see yourself as a moral agent or a person in society, and that's what education, the goal of education, is here. In section 2.2, Waldo draws attention to the difference between habit training and conditioning and aims to demonstrate that Locke's educational work cannot be understood as a manual for the conditioning of children. The reason for this, Waldo argues, is that habit training turns out to be far too complex to be subsumable under simple stimulus response patterns typical of behavioral conditioning. Frank says, I think the difference between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement is that the positive yields a lot of repetition, so the lessons can be more finely divided and learned more precisely. Negative reinforcement is a blunt instrument. That's fair. I mean, that is possibly what's going on here too, in sort of this, they said it's a complex motivational structure, that you can be more fine-grained with the positive, but the negative is just like it's sort of, you get confused in some sense. Like why are you getting beaten? It's hard to know. Frank says, and the child never learns the exact lesson because they don't repeat anything close to what their new aversion is to. That's fair too. Like they don't have opportunity to like refine their understanding. It all costs money. This feels a lot more like psychology than philosophy. Yeah, that's fair, but this is from Locke was from hundreds of years ago, so it was the same thing at the time. Now, we're still only on like really the first or second page of this paper, and so this is kind of background or just establishing a groundwork. Maybe there'll be more philosophical results later, but this is just getting warmed up, you know? And even if it sticks in the psychology, it's interesting that these were the terms getting used hundreds of years ago when John Locke was, writing. John Locke, he lived from 1632 to 1704. So we're talking about, there was no psychology back then. There was other stuff. So yeah. Okay. Locke's educational approach aims to turn children into rational moral agents who can use their reason and reflection well, but he is also aware that the reason develops gradually. This leads Locke to argue, so Waldo notes, that children ought to follow their parents' guidance only for as long as they are not in possession of reason. As children grow up and learn through experiences of esteem and disgrace, they develop a number of complex cognitive processes which enable them to see themselves as persons. The cognitive capacities that children develop during this learning process involve, for example, the ability to understand gestures, facial and verbal expressions of others, and to interpret the responses to one's own actions. Moreover, to see oneself as an agent who is subject to moral evaluation requires the capacities to abstract and to reflect on one's own doings and the experiences of esteem and disgrace caused by one's social interaction with others. Since Locke's educational approach involves such complex and sophisticated cognitive capacities, Waldo argues that habit training plays a significant role in it. Frank says, I say child, but of course I'm actually thinking about my doggo. Yeah, well, sure. I'm only ever negative with my dog if, one, they are threatening another pet, which doesn't happen anymore, or two, they walk into the street. Yeah, I mean, that's what these things, it's like, I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about the flourish. It should only be very rarely applied, and that only in great occasions and cases of extremity. So that would be an occasion of a great occasion or cases of extremity. So it's like the dog has to know that this is not something you get anywhere near, and that is why it's worth it to keep your dog safe and other dogs safe. So it's like, don't even get close to getting into a dangerous thing. Oh man, I just remembered. I saw a dog get hit by a car. I don't know if it died, but I saw a dog get hit by a car a year or two ago. Ugh, really sad, really sad. I was like, but like the dog was on the leash, and a kid was holding the leash on the sidewalk, but the leash was about 6 feet, and the dog ran out in between two parked cars, and a car came along and hit it. And it was like there was really no fault whatsoever on anyone did there, but it was just like, the kid lost his mind. The parents were in the house nearby. The kids start shrieking, and like the parents start freaking out, and I'm like trying to like settle things down. Yeah, it was like crazy situation. The kid takes off. I go chase the kid because the parents are freaking out, and so I go retrieve the kid and get him to come back, and it's like a whole mess. And like the dad like thanked me, like I was walking away, he was like, thank you, because like I went and got the kid. The kid like parents didn't know where the 7-year-old went, ran down the block. It was bad. So I was like, oh yeah. But I was like, this is the thing, this is why you have to be careful. And there was nothing that could have been done in that situation. The kid was holding the dog on the leash. The leash was just full 6 feet, 2 meters, and it was enough to get out into the street. And I don't know why the dog ran out, but it was sad. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, a little bit of a downer, but like that sort of thing sticks with you. It's like it was just a bad situation. Anyways, getting back to this. Okay, in section 2.3, Waldo applies Locke's views on education to his views on personhood in the essay. Waldo is in agreement with several other interpreters that Lockean persons are rational and moral agents, but she aims to add to existing interpretations that it is precisely because moral agency matters so much to Locke's account of personhood that we need to acknowledge that reason and reflection play a crucial role in how we become conscious of ourselves. Waldo emphasizes the epistemic aspect of being conscious of oneself, which for her concerns a person's ability to understand oneself as a moral being who is responsible for one's actions. Okay, and so now it all costs money. Here's your philosophical move. The epistemic aspect of being conscious of oneself. So that that you are aware of what's going on. Your knowledge of awareness. That's not a psychological thing. That's something that is known. That is something that you know about yourself. You are conscious of yourself, and you are conscious of your moral and your moral agency, that you have personhood. So it's a knowledge claim that you have an epistemic aspect of being conscious of oneself, and then your ability to understand oneself being moral who is responsible for your actions. So it's this self-reflective thing. And it's not just that our psychology is this way, it's that you know something. Okay, so there's your claim. In section 2.4, Waldo turns to a potential problem that Locke acknowledges, namely the possibility that there may be mistakes in how we self-attribute actions and settle our responsibilities. We can either attribute too much or too little to ourselves. According to Waldo, Locke's solution to such potential mistakes is that God can play an active role as divine judge and correct a person's mistaken self-conception, for instance, by reviving forgotten past experiences or by correcting false representations of past experiences. Yeah, me too, Brian. Yeah. So this is interesting. How are you appraising yourself correctly? God is helping you to make sure that you understand yourself correctly. That's insane, Locke, but okay, that is a claim. That is one of many philosophical claims, but like that God can play an active role as divine judge and correct a person's mistaken self-conception. That's madness. I'm sorry. What the fuck were you thinking, John? John, really? Like, that God's coming down and being like, no, 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 don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay. Hey, Frank, what do you mean, wait a sec? Well, that's one of the things. Like, the idea that God from on high is coming down and giving you, like, therapy advice. It's like, all right. Really? And like, yeah, or the devil for that matter. Like, you got a little angel on this shoulder and a little devil on this one, and how do you know which one it is? Who knows? Yeah, well, that's fair, O'Brien. Pre-enlightenment logic, A implies insert God B. Exactly. Just put God in the middle, as always. Frank says, God is a measuring stick against which I compare myself. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just find this sort of hilarious that like God is acting as therapist, but that's a new one for me. But I guess what was that? Alanis Morissette. What if God was one of us? Because like your therapist is God. I'm sure there's been some show where the therapist was actually God. Okay, Waldo highlights once more that for consciousness, for Locke has an epistemic function. She claims that consciousness not only gives us knowledge of our responsibilities as moral agents, but also puts a stop to suspicions revolving around the idea that the miseries that have befallen us in our lives on Earth constitute some kind of divine punishment for something we are not aware of having done. Crow? Maybe. I don't know what that is. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Sheryl Crow? Maybe, yeah. Yeah. Could be. Yeah, so having outlined some of Waldo's core contributions, I now turn to my own critical observations and want to raise a few issues that deserve further consideration. Yeah, see, this was all just set up. This is how, I mean, and I'm not, I don't mean to like harp on you. It's only money. It all costs money. This is how I discuss things. I like to point out how philosophy papers are written and what's the rhetoric. I was talking about this earlier. Rhetoric makes a big deal to me. This person has set up their essay as a response to a book chapter. And so what they did was they established the claims of the book chapter, and now they're going to shift to what they're doing. This is a very short paper, so they're only making a few claims. They're just saying, these are the really important parts. So it's kind of like a critical notice almost. It's like, hey, they said these, like, made these big claims, and I'm pointing out some really important parts. Oh, it's Joan Osborne. Cool. Joan Osborne's cool. But yeah, I just find this, like, interesting that we're getting God as, like, therapist or psychologist, like your in-head therapist or psychologist. And the idea that you have voices in your head is not actually, that's a psychological topic too. Socrates was said that he had a daemon in his head. Like, they use the word demon, but it didn't mean the same thing for the ancient Greeks. So they had the daemon in your head where that was like telling him to like ask questions and do stuff. And other people, have voices in their head, and this is like how they have conversations or they talk to them. And so this has been in the history of philosophy for a long time, and in the history of psychology also, of course. So the idea that God is somehow a corrective force at this level is, even though I find that just sort of hilarious nowadays, it has a long history of, it's not as crazy in the history of philosophy. So, okay, continuing. From education to from moral agency and personhood. I'm losing it already. Waldo argues that Locke's esteem-based education, which aims at habit training rather than conditioning, makes it possible for children to develop the cognitive capacities through which they can come to see themselves as persons with morally valuable qualities. Waldo argues for this, for instance, in the following passage, quote, Locke's habit training fosters the ability to engage in these processes. It provides children with the opportunity to abstract from their actions, build new idea connections, which means that they can start to reason, and develop a perspective through which they can discover themselves as persons with morally valuable qualities. Having the ability to think of oneself as a person worthy of esteem and disgrace, and comprehending oneself as a moral agent here seem to emerge in unison, and as a result of reflections triggered through one's engagement with an intersubjective context. End quote. Author says, in my view, it is worth considering further how Locke's esteem-based education can be reconciled with his moral views in the essay. In Book 2, Chapter 18, the chapter that immediately follows Locke's chapter of identity and diversity, Locke distinguishes 3 types of law, namely 1, divine law, 2, civil law, and 3, the law of opinion and reputation. According to Locke, all of these laws require a lawmaker who has the power to enforce the law by means of reward and punishment. As Locke argues, for each type of law there are distinctive enforcements or rewards and punishments. If actions are considered in relation to divine law, we judge whether actions are sins or duties. If actions are considered in relation to civil law, we judge whether they are criminal or innocent. If they are considered in relation to the law of opinion and reputation, whether they are virtues or vices. Locke argues further that divine law is the only true touchstone of moral rectitude. Okay, yeah, so we have this all the time, actually. I mean, you can just, in contemporary society, and this goes back to Aristotle, we have like criminal law and then we have civil law. And so the criminal law is like, did you do something bad as a crime? And civil law is, did you like harm the civil society? Frank says, I think it was not Morissette. My brain filled with Sheryl Crow for not Morissette. Yeah, fine. Unreal says, gotta admit it, Locke is about the least cool philosopher these days. I'm more of a Hume stan. Well, you're in with the crowd. I don't think people think Locke is cool anymore. Hume has been cool forever, though. I don't know when that's gonna end. The website, this Phil Papers site, they once did a survey on who would you want to hang out with in the history of philosophy, and Hume won by like leaps and bounds. Everyone thinks Hume is cool. I don't think Locke even made the list. Like, some people, of course, want to go hang out with like the ancient Greeks, but like Hume was like by far the number one person that people thought was like, yeah, they'd want to hang out with. And Hume was apparently a fun person. Like, he didn't actually hang out with philosophers. He hung out with other people. So, like, he was like, like writers and like actors and stuff. There is sufficient textual evidence for the view that Lockean persons will ultimately be held accountable and rewarded and punished in accordance with divine law. This is a point that Waldo acknowledges. However, I believe that further consideration can be given to how children or young adults come to learn about divine law and how they start to see themselves and their actions bound by divine law. Given Locke's and Waldo's view that children are best motivated by means of esteem and disgrace, it is plausible to argue that Locke's approach to education focuses in the first instance on the law of opinion and reputation. Okay, so now we're elevating opinion and reputation. The social theory is actually the most important thing. Unreal Brian says, read Bear's little bio of Hume. Hume spent a while as a kept man in a 3-way relationship in Paris apartment. Yeah, like, he was, Hume was having fun. Like, he was having a good time. So that's the thing. Like, people like Hume. And like, Hume did cool things. Like, he saved Jean-Jacques Rousseau's ass once. Like, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was going to get himself murdered or something by the French. And like, Hume put him up in like England or whatever on his own dime. So it's like, not only was like he fun to hang out with, he was like a stand-up guy too. I mean, it's unfortunate that like all these guys were racist as fuck, Hume included, but like, other than like the racism in the history of philosophy, Hume was cool. So yeah, this is just interesting that Locke is really putting everything into the opinion and reputation. Like, if this author is right, the idea that the social is more important than everything else is kind of interesting. Author says, I would like to hear more about how children or young adults come to see divine law as the only true touchstone of moral rectitude. As mentioned above, Waldo acknowledges that, for Locke, our cognitive capacities, such as capacities to reason and reflect, develop gradually, and that children who are in the early stages of their development rely on the guidance of parents or other caregivers gradually start to follow their own reason. This could provide a clue for addressing my question. One may suggest that as children develop their reasoning capacities, they become able to inquire about the proper foundation of morality. Well, I mean, I guess kids would be like, well, is this moral? I mean, I don't really know any kids that would ask that question, but they could. Once they start using their reasoning capacities, they are in a position to investigate moral issues, which may lead them to discover divine law and the existence of a superior lawmaker who can enforce divine law by means of a reward and punishment. This is merely a rough sketch of how it may be possible to explain how children who were brought up by Locke's esteem-based education become moral agents or persons who see their actions as bound by divine law. Okay, so if you're saying like, okay, you have reputation, and then you can have like an even bigger reputation in the eyes of God. So like you can have reputation in your reputation in your community, reputation in like with your parents, like your caregivers, and then like your class or whatever. But then again, I guess you could reason, and then you'd have reputation in the eyes of God. And that makes some sense, I guess. Like how else would it be bound by divine law? You'd have karma. Like in the eyes of the universe, you have some sort of scorecard. Okay, Waldo's proposal that some thoughts provides important background for understanding Locke's view on agency and personhood in the essay could be strengthened by spelling out with more detail how Locke can explain the process through which children become moral agents. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to go from this generalization. That's the only thing I can see is what I just said was you have a reputation with the people, your family, then your community, and then maybe even your society. And then after that, you could say with your, the universe or God or whatever. So like in the eyes of the church, what is the esteem that you have there? So, and then you have like maybe not just the church, but like God above or whatever it is. Yeah, so you've got some sort of reputational karmic scorecard. All right. So, and like, this is like short paper. We're on page 6 of 10. So, and it's going to be over, at the end of page 8 or page 9. So, what'd I do? Where was I? Yeah, here we go. I would like to, continuing, Locke on actions, consciousness, and persons. I would like to take a closer look at another set of issues and consider what Lockean actions are and what role they play in Locke's account of persons, personal identity, and consciousness. Waldo argues that in Locke's experience-based philosophy, claims about consciousness are crucially connected with claims about agency, given that one's actions and the way they are experienced by oneself and others that inform one's thoughts about the self. Waldo sees actions as significant for the conception we form of ourselves, though she also notes that it does not follow from this that Lockean persons are reducible to their actions. Throughout his discussion of persons and personal identity in essays, Locke speaks of the thoughts and actions that a person or self is conscious of and ascribes to herself. Thus, there is no doubt that actions play a central role in Locke's account of persons and personal identity. However, I believe that Waldo's understanding of Lockean actions can be questioned because his text, Locke's text, because I think Waldo's female, Locke's text also leaves scope for a different interpretation of what an action is. Before we take a closer look at Locke's text, let me outline how Waldo understands Lockean actions. Hey Harem King, what's up? Do you think it's easier being a woman in today's modern world than a man? No, I think it sucks for everybody. I don't know, like it depends where you are. Maybe there's locally places that it's easier to be a man or a woman. Globally, I have no fucking clue. Yeah, I frankly, things suck for everybody nowadays. That's kind of just like, we can go with the communist thing that like, we're all getting our crushed under capitalism now. And so I don't know if I know. And the other thing is I'm a bad sociologist. I don't know. That's a sociological question about like, groups of people and who has it easier. I really don't know. Like I'm a terrible sociologist. You need to ask someone more informed than me. So I don't know if it's easier being a man or a woman. Like things suck all around. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Like if you want to know abstract metaphysics, I'm your guy. If you want to know about what's actually happening in the world, yeah, exactly. Go ask someone else. Maybe they'll give you a better answer. Sorry, it's like not something I know well enough. I can guess. I'd be like, flip a coin. Heads, men have it easier. Tails, women. You got heads. So what'd I say? Whatever it was. I forgot already. Streamer brain strikes again. Okay, so This is what Waldo understands of Lockean actions. She writes, "When I speak of an action, I do not refer to physiological occurrences that could take place without being accompanied by consciousness. Rather, actions are conceived as necessarily involving consciousness in the sense that, while being performed, I or someone else I am conscious of what I am doing as my action." So when talking about actions, we are not dealing with zombie sleepwalkers or intoxicated drunkards who move around without being aware of what they are doing, but with Lockean persons, synchronically speaking, who exist at the time the relevant action is being performed and attribute this action to themselves. While I accept, end quote. So basically, you have to know what you're doing when you're doing it. That's what you understand of a Lockean person or an agent, is an action is something you do when you know you're doing it. So when I flipped the coin, I knew I was flipping the coin, and that's how it goes. Author says, while I accept that moral agency involves consciousness, there is textual evidence that speaks against Waldo's interpretation that for Locke, actions necessarily involve consciousness. MDD asks, if I kill someone during my sleepwalk, am I morally responsible? I don't think so, because, I mean, like, what do you mean kill someone? Was it like an accidental, like, you were walking along, you pulled out, like, and your foot caught on some power thing, and then because the power was out, someone died. You stabbed them. Okay, that's different. I still, like, it's hard to attribute any sort of moral stuff to when you don't have consciousness, because that would be the same thing as like if you were being controlled by a machine, like you didn't do it yourself, and so it's hard to attribute moral blame to you. Now, did you hate the person? Like, were you happy that you stabbed them? That'd be different. Hey Vipers, what's up? Frank says, if you had reason to think that you were dangerous but didn't take steps, then yes. Yeah, see, this is the thing, like, if it was like you had trained yourself to do it while asleep and then you did it while you were asleep, then it seems like, yeah, because then you had put time and effort in. Someone, for all you international folks out there that are not in the great United States of America, recently a lady was convicted of shooting her neighbor. She claimed she was drunk and thought that he was blocking her out of her house, so she shot him. Like, he opened the door and she shot him, and she claimed she was drunk and that he was acting belligerent and she was a cop, and she pulled her gun out and shot the guy. This was very convenient because it turned out afterwards that they had a long relationship. They may have even been dating at a certain time. Then, like, something bad happened, and it was very convenient that she was drunk with her gun and just happened to shoot the guy dead. Yeah, so that happened recently, and I think they sent her to jail. But yeah, so like if it's really one of these, you were out of your mind, like you were something that had nothing to do with you, and then you were there and like you slipped, fell, and like stabbed someone by mistake, probably not. But if you had kind of had any inkling or knowing that you were going to stab them, as Frank says, yeah, you might have some responsibility. And Viper says you probably just planned it anyway, so that's right. Anywho. How you doing, Vipers? Welcome in. Hope you're doing good. We'll read that paper you dropped off last time about sex and horror. I wouldn't read it if you weren't here. I think that'd be unfair. You actually found what looked like a fun paper, so wait for you to be here to read it. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like speaks again. The author's claiming that Locke for Locke, you might not need to be conscious to perform actions. For instance, in his chapter of Power, Locke claims that there being but two sorts of action, wherever we have any idea, specifically thinking and motion. Yes, idea specifically thinking and motion. Frank says it's moderately difficult to stab someone to death. It would be so hard to convince me that it was accidental. That's fair. That's why, like, I think the shooting someone might be more interesting, because, like, you just, like, react and pull a gun out or something. But, yeah. I mean, of course, like, you happen to perfectly stab someone in the neck or, like, right between the ribs. But that would be just more of a dumb luck accident at that point, too. Okay, so Locke here regards motions as actions. This means that unconscious bodily motions can be actions for Locke, contrary to Waldo's understanding of actions. We need to do a study. I mean, I bet this is the sort of thing that actually is known. Like, this is the sort of thing if we had someone who knew forensics, they could tell us. Like, I bet, unless you're suggesting we stab somebody, which, go right ahead. Tell me how it works out. But I think this is probably something like, forensic peoples know. Okay, so if just any motion, then sleepwalking could be an action, and then you're not conscious of sleepwalking, clearly. So this tension deserves closer examination. Waldo may argue that unconscious actions can be put aside in the context of Locke's discussion of persons and personal identity in the essay, since only the actions which a person performs with consciousness belong to the person. Viper says, that dude Phil Paper's profile is full of papers like XXX Zombies, Economies of Desire and Disgust, Torture Porn, Popular Horror After Saw, and Hardcore Horror, Challenging the Discourse of Extremity. This is what I was talking about earlier. That person gets it. This is a person from the internet that's writing philosophy. Their stuff's going to get read. It may not be the best stuff in the world, but they're going to be a popular author because those titles rule. And you're going to get people to read your papers. This guy is smart, or lady, whatever. Who is that person? That person is smart. Whatever, they're Steve Jones. Okay. So Steve Jones is smart. Yeah. Sentient. They got that battalion in them? Yeah. Stabby. So. Where was I? Yeah, so you can put the questions aside when the consciousness belongs to the person. So the author says, while such a move strikes me as plausible, it also has implications about how we understand the role of consciousness and Locke's account of persons and personal identity. As already mentioned, Waldo emphasizes that consciousness has an epistemic function insofar as consciousness enables a person to understand herself as a moral agent who will receive reward and punishment for her actions, and by being conscious of past actions, a person can comprehend why she is rewarded or punished for these actions. However, I believe it is worth asking whether consciousness also has other functions than the epistemic function that Waldo highlights. For example, Udo Thiel claims that for Locke, consciousness constitutes the person and its identity by unifying thoughts and actions. If we accept that actions are not necessarily conscious, but that only some of them are performed with consciousness and others, such as bodily motions, can be unconscious, then interpretations like Thiel's that argue that consciousness plays a constitutive role can help explain why Locke's account of persons and personal identity focuses on conscious actions. Overall, I am inclined to think that consciousness plays a more important role in Locke's discussion of persons and personal identity than Waldo acknowledges. I will return to these issues and elaborate further on them in the next section. I mean, okay, so this person's arguing that you have to know what you're fucking doing while you're doing stuff. And if you don't, there's actions you can perform, but then you can't learn anything from them. That makes some sense. And so they're basically arguing that if you are in a position where you have to learn things about like what's right or wrong or what God thinks of you or something like that, this is a social theory going on here. You need to be conscious. I mean, that's not a shocking position to hold, that you have to know you have to be conscious of the social order to learn social things. And if you are unconscious, you are incapable of being social. That's fair, and I guess they're kind of criticizing Waldo for not making that as clear as possible. But yeah, if knowledge is fundamentally, and that's what they're claiming here, starts off as a social thing where you learn esteem, and that's how you start to learn complex ideas through the esteem you get once you reflect on what you're doing in a society. Then you need to be able to be conscious of esteem, and you can't do that if you're not conscious. All right, consciousness and its role in Locke's account of persons and personal identity. It is worth examining further whether consciousness plays merely an epistemic role in Locke's account of persons and personal identity, or whether it plays a metaphysical or some other role. Waldo argues for her view that consciousness has an important epistemic function as follows. By rendering accessible to me what I did, consciousness acquires an important epistemic function. It enables me to understand my possession as an accountable agent, and thereby allows me to comprehend what it is that I am going to be punished for when facing judgment on the great day. In the great day, wherein the secrets of all hearts shall be laid open, it may be reasonable to think no one shall be made to answer for what he knows nothing of, but shall receive his doom, conscience accusing or excusing him. Sorry, it's a flourishy language. I'm impressed by it, but I gotta get better at reading it. Yes. So if you can't, you're not going to receive doom for things you didn't know about. So that's interesting. End quote. Yeah. Waldo here draws attention to an important aspect of Locke's view, namely that consciousness, by revealing to me what I did, makes it possible for me to understand why I am now held responsible for past actions and questions. Yeah, bars. Well, I got to get better at that. I want to be able to like make an impact when I want to. Waldo holds that Locke's God plays an active role at the divine last judgment by reviving forgotten past experiences or by correcting false representations of past experiences. I am in agreement with her that God plays an active role in the last judgment, but in my view, further consideration can be given to the question of what criterion God uses when they make resurrected persons conscious of their past. Here are two possible criteria that God might use. A, God traces the continued existence of a human being, and B, God traces sameness of consciousness. One serious difficulty with the proposal that God uses criterion A is that it neglects Locke's view that it is important to distinguish the idea of a person from the idea of a human being or man. This conceptual distinction helps Locke to argue that persons rather than human beings are to be held accountable for their actions and will be resurrected in the afterlife. Moreover, Locke offers several examples that are meant to show that, at least theoretically, a person's continued existence does not have to coincide with their continued existence of a human being. Therefore, it is more plausible that God uses a different criterion that traces the continued existence of a person rather than human being. Right, so this goes back to the old idea of there's a soul that God is more concerned about than your corporeal body. So if you're just tracking the body, it's kind of like missing stuff. Hey, what's up, Retheus? What's an issue for you? The Star Trek transporter argument. We're still back to that. We love that one, don't we? What's up? Yeah. So what are you thinking? That the transporter is not transporting a soul when it transports it? I mean, we're reading about Locke, who was, he died in 1704 or something. So it's this is, Christian theology in some sense is mixed in with this stuff. Yeah. Well, this is trying to talk about what Locke thinks about persons in education, and they're going for the social theory. They're saying that esteem, reputation, is what really matters to Locke. And so, L for Locke, not keeping up with Star Trek. Yeah, the transporter turns away the team into the away team into zombies. Exactly. So everyone loses their soul. It just gets left on the ship. But this is the thing. We're in Locke's world, so you're in sort of a Christian theological context where you're gonna have a soul and then your body that is like a vessel for it. And so you can make this distinction very easy. Yeah. You want me to argue for Star Trek? I mean, it exists. What are we arguing more than Star Trek? That context is simple? Arguing for Star Trek is just that is the context. It is. Is it good or bad? I mean, I can argue that it is because, we're talking about it in chat, and therefore we're talking about it. Should it be? What that Star Trek should not be? We should just erase Star Trek from our collective memories. We'd be better off as humans never having Star Trek. I doubt that. I mean, Lucille Ball saved Star Trek, and if Lucille Ball decided that Star Trek should be, then it should be because Lucille Ball is correct. And therefore, Star Trek should be because Lucille Ball decided it was so, and she made it so. Lucille Ball saved it. She had her own production studio, and she was the only reason I think it got made. So Lucille Ball, because she was a famous star at this time, and she was a badass, she basically saved Star Trek. Let's go look this up real fast for Retheus. Lucille Ball, Star Trek. I misspelled it. Yeah. So we've got the summarizer here is like right here. So they have their AI built right in. And so we wouldn't have Star Trek without Lucille Ball. So throw this in chat. I'm not making any of this shit up. Yeah, Desilu Productions, exactly. No, like literally a thing. Lucille Ball backed Star Trek when no one else would. She literally it was her production company, Desilu. Yeah, right here, Desilu. And she made The Untouchables and Mission Impossible. Wow. So yeah, she did this. Yep. Absolutely, Rethius. I think that Lucy was kind of awesome. So all the fun things, I hope she did them. Yeah, but we're just discussing Locke and like this weird sort of theory that, well, I don't know how weird it is, but that like it's reputation that's fundamental, and that's how we learn, because we want to have the right kind of esteem in the eyes of society or God. And that's kind of what's going on. And so the esteem that is accorded to you is not according, of course, to your physical body, because the esteem is going to survive, or maybe not survive, but it shouldn't be just accorded with the existence of some object, because it exists, in the minds of others, and in this case, probably in the mind of God for Locke. So then we're going to go, God traces the sameness of consciousness. So God is tracing how esteemed your conscious is. Locke is no Lucy, no. Like, Locke was not, like, someone else was mentioning in chat earlier, I forget who. Maybe it was MDD or Unreal. But they were saying, like, no one wants to hang out with Locke. Everyone wants to hang out with Hume. No. People want to hang out with Lucy. Lucy was cool. Frank says this is really interesting. What, the Lucy thing or the Locke thing? I'll grant the Lucy thing is kind of fascinating. Oh, esteem doesn't accrue to the body or the soul. No. I actually looked into the theory of reputation a few years back. It's really difficult, actually. Where is it? It's in some sort of social space, where, like a social epistemic space, where you are judging things in between, like, compared to other things. So you can't actually go to the body or the soul, but it looks like Locke is saying to the consciousness, but like that's weird too. Rethia says, I definitely hang with Locke, but like once every month. Yeah, exactly. Like, he's cool, but not that cool. Until that fucking guy hooked me on some idea, we started just dissecting and you got frustrated. Well, yeah, he's a philosopher, so I'm sure he'd like to argue about stuff, like have discussions and whatnot. Okay, so yeah, we're going to start talking about criterion B, that God traces the sameness of consciousness, and that's how esteem is tracked according to your consciousness. So criterion B overcomes these problems and focuses on the continued existence of persons, because Locke argues that personal identity consists in the sameness of consciousness. Of course, there are challenges with spelling out in a non-circular way what the sameness of consciousness is for Locke, but Locke scholars have made proposals how these challenges can be addressed. For instance, Shelley Weinberg suggests that God traces a metaphysical fact of consciousness. My own proposal is that sameness of consciousness for Locke has a metaphysical foundation, which most likely has a relational structure. So that's interesting, yeah. So according to Shelley, there's like, God can just be like, boom, you got a fact that this conscious is that consciousness, and then the author here is saying there is a metaphysical foundation, so they can like trace it kind of more like a human, like a person over time, that you can sort of like look at where the foundation came from, as opposed to having a fact that the same consciousness remains over time. Yeah, that's the identity here at Rethius. It's that, no, this is actually how God tracks what your identity is. Words are hard. Believe me, after I hit the 2-hour mark, if I get near the 3-hour mark, words get real hard for me. Personal identity is not the sameness of consciousness. Personal identity here, this is how God tracks your identity, is through the sameness of consciousness. So, you could call it personal identity, but this is a slightly weird theory. It's how God traces the metaphysical fact that your consciousness exists. Okay. Words have always been the easiest. The meaning sometimes eludes. Both, Rethius, both. Frank says God tracking the soul makes sense because neither God nor the soul really exist. There you go. Easy peasy. Continuing. By highlighting the epistemic and moral dimensions of Locke's view, Waldo, as I understand her, intends to offer an alternative to more prominent metaphysical interpretations of Locke's account of personal identity. Yeah, it all costs money. Make less word, use less brain. Yeah, sometimes. Viper says, how does God trace Phineas Gage's identity? See, this is the hard thing. Once you start getting into like, where is the seat of the soul? If it's in the mind and you can destroy it, did the soul change? This is one of these fun things of 20th century philosophy you've been asking. Frank says, actually, maybe they define one another. God is that which tracks a person by the soul. I mean, that would work. I mean, I don't think any religious person would want to say that God is dependent on like tracking of like humans, but like it would probably work in a relational sense. So yeah. Be more condescending, get more dopamine. Hey, if it works. Okay, so author says, however, I'm inclined to think that the epistemic reading that she offers could be reconciled with other readings that maintain that consciousness also has a metaphysical function. Relational like an uncle? Well, more usually when the philosophers say relational, it means that you only know things like in relation to something else. So like up and down, it's a relational thing. You only know up because there's a down. Like east and west, it's a relational thing. You have to know north and south and east and west, and so they're related to each other. It's not an absolute. It's not like there's like some absolute value. It's related to the other ones, and then once you know like your left hand, then you know your right hand. You could call it something else, but like left and right are related to each other. That's all. MDD says the real question is why being more condescending should result in getting more dopamine. Actually I don't think that's too hard. Like, because condescension is like, oh, I'm better than you, and like so you get some cheap high after feeling better about someone else, like, oh, you fool, how dare you make such an obvious mistake. So you get that like little bit of indignancy of like indignancy is real cheap. You get to feel like you're morally right and you're above somebody else, and that's a cheap high. It all costs money. If you add that dark makeup, you describe the entire goth scene. Yeah, but well, there you go. I mean, I don't want to hate on all the goths, but like, it's what it is. There's reasons why people group together because they like certain things. So. Like if maybe they like being condescending and that's how they get their highs. MDD says, I wonder if that answer just kicks the can. Why should indignancy result in getting more dopamine? Well, it wasn't the indignancy. It's that you get the cheap feeling of being better than someone else. Like they are stupid and you are smart. And you get to like, oh yeah, because they did that stupid thing, they are dumber than I am. Now, why? Maybe that kicks the can too. Like, why does like someone else doing something stupid make you feel like you're above them? But I don't know. So maybe it does. But I was just saying it's an easy way to classify someone else as worse than you, and people like that. They want to feel superior. Now, is that an answer in itself? Is feeling superior a metaphysical answer to like why like we are the way we are? Maybe not, and so maybe it does just kick the can. Yeah, but hierarchies, social hierarchies. Yeah, maybe Frank. Like, is it maybe just biology or is it something else? I don't know, but could be. Unreal says people who think they know everything are a great annoyance to those of us who do. That's a wonderful quote from Isaac Asimov. It all costs money. Well, now I do not like feeling superior, but apparently speak in condescending tone. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I don't know if Evo Psych and Bio was any good, but like that's the thing. If you want to ask on the philosophical side of things, just having like more like again the social like the social esteem, people like that. And it's like, why? Maybe there's some other reason. You don't have to go to the evolution side of things. Maybe just like, standing in society is a good in itself. Like, having money, having like friends. And as soon as and then like if you're stupid, you don't get those things. Maybe you don't have to go all the way back. Maybe you can just declare those things goods. Just like baseline goods. So, because do you need to justify when things are good? Sometimes you do, maybe not, but like, Do we really need to go back to the Evo psych? I don't know. Frank says, being better than someone else implies better futures for you than otherwise. Maybe. I mean, people like to think so, at least. They like to think, oh, I'm smart and I'm going to do well because I'm smart and good. A lot of things come down to luck and people want to admit that. But, I mean, people like to feel like, oh, I'm smart and good and I'm better than others and I should feel good about myself because, I'm smart and good. Is that the case? I don't know. Like, does it actually work? I don't know. But I definitely... Can you get a quick evaluation of Locke's definition of moral agency? I don't know what his definition of moral agency is. I only know what we're talking about here. I don't know enough about Locke to give you the definition of moral agency. It just looks like from what we've been reading here that Locke thinks that you do recognize, once you have knowledge of your actions in society, that you can reflect on them. And once you can reflect on how your actions affect others and the feedback you get, that is the moral agency. That there is this feedback and you understand it. So that's all I understand from here. An actual picture of John Locke. Wasn't this guy on a TV show? I don't know. Was he? But thank you, Vipers. Oh, and you were using the old slang for bathroom door. Yeah. I'm here all week. As a John. Got that afterwards. Okay. So yeah. So the question is... Yeah. Said in a tired voice, Frank. Getting towards the end of like my streaming ability. But I'm on page 9 of 10 here. So we're just about done with the paper. Alright, let's finish this up. Author would find it helpful if Waldo could clarify whether she holds that consciousness has only an epistemic function or whether she would be willing to acknowledge that consciousness can additionally have metaphysical function, which can be relevant, for instance, when God traces a person's past at the last judgment. One advantage of acknowledging that consciousness has a metaphysical function in addition to an epistemic function is that it helps to take seriously Locke's conceptual distinction between persons and human beings. Yeah, again, this is looking like some sort of theology where you have like a soul and then the body. So if we're tracing the metaphysics of consciousness, that there's like the spark of will or something there, then that would make sense that that's what God is tracking. Like whatever like spark of like humanity that we have in our consciousness, it doesn't really rely on the body, or it might rely on the body, but it's not identical to it. So this distinction plays an important role in Locke's discussion of persons and personal identity in the essay, but it is not present in some thoughts. Overall, I believe that there are convincing reasons for acknowledging that consciousness also has a metaphysical function. However, if Waldo accepts this move, one challenge for interpretations will be that Locke does not explicitly distinguish between persons and human beings in some thoughts. To strengthen her view that Locke's account of persons and personal identity builds on his account of education, it would be desirable to provide additional arguments to address this challenge. To sum up, Waldo's chapter on Locke offers a very valuable contribution to existing scholarship on the topic, and I hope it stimulates further discussion of how Locke's views on education are related with his views on personhood and moral agency. MDD, God, I'm such a bad student. I doubt that, but okay. How did we start with disciplining school kids and end up with continuity of consciousness and its implications in the last judgment? This is, welcome to like philosophy, where you start off with learning that you are a moral agent, and then congratulations, God is the final arbiter. And so that's it. It was the jump from you learn, you have consciousness, and then once you have knowledge that you are have esteem and a reputation, then all of a sudden you also have a reputation in the eyes of God. And that was the jump that Locke makes. Did someone say metaphysics? Yes. Well, this is how God tracks you, Ivan Neo. God is a tracking is an agent, and they track you through your immortal soul, which is at the spark of consciousness, and God can track the spark of consciousness within you, and that is the metaphysical. That's the metaphysics that Locke says, and that's how God judges you at the last judgment, is by tracking your consciousness through. They track your consciousness. That's how it happens. Viper says, can philosophy be described as good even when the presuppositions and therefore everything following it are wrong? Does he though? Clearly, obviously, Ivan. I mean, this is what Locke thinks. Locke also died in 1704. Vipers, this is why we have more than just one rating system. Oh yeah, and we can rate this now. So I don't know if I have anything specific to say, but everyone now in chat is willing to rate this and we can talk about it. And these are the ratings that I have. Now, can you describe philosophy as good even when the presuppositions are wrong? Vipers, all philosophy is wrong in the end. Everything's always wrong. Can you make hay with what you have is the question. Now, here's the thing. Is this an interesting theory in the case that, like, Locke is claiming that esteem is fundamental, that reputation is fundamental. That is what's fundamental to actual consciousness and agency. So that's an interesting idea that it's esteem and reputation. And then we go all like, then he goes off the wall as far as like us modern, like contemporary people think, because like then God is looking at your esteem in God's eyes as a moral agent. We don't buy that. But forget God at this point. Is esteem as something that's fundamental to our moral and socialization? Is that really what's fundamental? That we know we are in a society and a society judges us in a certain way. Maybe that is fundamental and maybe that's worth something. So yes, is Locke wrong in the last analysis? Yeah, sure. I completely agree with that. I'm with Ivan. Like, you think God's tracking your consciousness through some sort of like weird metaphysics of how your consciousness gloms onto social esteem? Hell fucking no. Is it an interesting theory that maybe social theory gloms on to like how you are perceived in society, and then maybe Locke has something interesting to say about how we should educate people because it is a fundamentally social thing. Maybe that's interesting. Yeah. So emote review. So thank you, Frank, for voting. As everyone here is welcome to vote. It's a bit of so we've got three. We've got a little bit of a knife, which is the scalpel, a little slice and dice. This was a technical argument. They were slicing and dicing up someone else's thing. Fun ideas and the vote. Yay, appreciate that. Technically those are raisins. They are raisins. Well, they're grapes. Well, they're grapes turning into raisins. And wait, don't raisins rule your world or something? Why does the grapes emote remind you of impotence as a man? That's the point, MDD, because it's for things that promise a lot and then they shrivel up. They pull back all their conclusions. Now, this paper didn't really do that. This paper didn't make any grand claims. You may not like the paper, but didn't make any grand claims and then not deliver on them. So this is not a grapes or raisin one. Is it navel-gazing only for academics? A little bit. This is sort of telling people that it's, yes, the Unreal Brian gave it a navel gaze. A little bit of navel-gazing here. Unreal Brian says, I'm not sure what I want to say is kind of, here's what I think about Waldo, thinks about Locke, a little in the weeds. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's fair. This is a little bit navel-gazing, but like, Frank gave it some fun ideas. So maybe you think it's, fun to do the social theory. And that's the thing. You have to forgive it sort of the crazy metaphysics. Like, that's not the point. Maybe that's the point why they wrote it. They might have liked it, but like there's more to it than that. And so like, yeah, philosophy, you're not going to like everything, but that's why we have Brain Dance, where they're fun ideas. Is it going to get a golden turd? Was it shit underneath? I don't think this is a golden turd. Like, it wasn't like trying to be all fancy and then shit underneath. It's like, yeah, we don't think in lockstep, but quite your whining. Yeah, quit your whining. Frank says, the reason I think it is good, despite God being shoehorned in, is that you can redefine God in some goofy way that makes the whole thing remain coherent. Yeah, that's what I was saying. You drop off like the craziness, and then you keep the rest of the theory, which was a substantial part of this paper, and then it's like, not terrible. Grapes produce isn't so delightful to consume, but cheers to that. Yeah, so let me think. What am I going to say? I'll call this a vote yay. I'll give this a vote yay. That's not how you spell. Was this Deep Ancient Mysteries? No. I'll give this I'll give it a knife too. Is this Fun Ideas? Yeah, I'm still thinking about that. Yeah, picking up or dropping off. That's a lot of philosophy. I mean, you can drop the Ghostbusters emotes if people have them. But yeah, that's a lot of philosophy. Is like you drop the bad ideas, stick with the good ones. And this is one of the things about these classic authors. You want to vote Matt? I've been trying to think of up, down, or whatever. You can do a yay and nay, but you can just leave it off. I mean, I've been thinking about a vote Matt also. So yeah. But that's the thing. All these authors have heinous ideas in the history of philosophy. I mean, I asked Aris this once. He was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Dude, everyone's terrible." And he was like trying to think of somebody. He thinks John Stuart Mill was okay. Everyone else is completely heinous, and you have to drop those ideas and keep the good ones. But that's, like I said, that's everybody in the history of philosophy, save John Stuart Mill, maybe, according to Aris. And I keep mentioning him. So let me drop the links here. So these are all of our friends. If anyone here doesn't know our buddy Aristotle, that's who I'm mentioning. He's another philosophy streamer. He does ethics and ancient philosophy. Ivan Neo's, of course, in chat. He's here talking about science and rationality. There's Evolve Yourself TV Agni. He does a lot of meditation on stream, but he's also an analytic philosopher. Does science, mind, and metaphysics. And he's a chess shooter, so you can ask about that stuff. Our friends in related professions that are online: Infernal, Sociology and Politics, History and Sociology with Shane McGinnis. He's brilliant. There's a linguistic streamer, streams on Sundays. She's going to be streaming again soon, Kali Oxenfree. And then Lumpy, of course, is a chemist. Frank says I didn't catch the context. My brain, yeah, whatever's. What's heinous? I don't know. Heinous things. In philosophy, like I was saying earlier, Hume was terribly racist. You drop those ideas, and then they say stupid things at times that we learned later are just dumb. So they have bad biology, bad female biology because there was a guy and they said something about women. It's you just drop that. Who gives a shit? Yeah. So if you're Rousseau, the answer is definitely dropping off the kids. Yeah. So, but again, that's not why you read the history of philosophy. You don't read the history of philosophy for, the fuck-ups. You read the history of philosophy is because maybe they had interesting ideas about social learning. And all of a sudden you'd be like, hey, Locke had all this interesting stuff to say about social learning theory from hundreds of years ago that gives a new light on things that happened afterwards. It makes a difference. So Peirce was pro-slavery in the 1910s, not a good look. I didn't even know that. You see? Yeah. Oh, well, too bad for Peirce. And then, waiting for the Heidegger to get dropped. It's like the Nazi just waiting for Adolf Hitler to get dropped in other conversations. What about Hitler? Wouldn't you go back and kill Hitler? Viper says, rather than sex and horror, may I request a non-exturbia vid to play us out? I think I'll enjoy it. I'm not going to read sex and horror now. But yeah, dictionary, heinous, Heidegger. I mean, yeah, so that's the thing. If you want to just pull out the Nazi card, we can do that too. All right, so anyone else want to get their review in? You're all free to get your review in now. Analytic philosophers trying to be smug when they have Frege. Yeah, I mean, Frege turned just anti-Semitic and shit in his later years. He's like, oh, the Jews are keeping me down. No, Frege, you were kind of an asshole too. Ivan Neo says, even when we consider philosophers exclusively on their work, we would still have to shoot Heidegger. No, a lot of people like Heidegger. Just because you're not continental doesn't make him a bad metaphysician. He probably was top 5 metaphysicians of the last century. Just because you don't like him, that don't mean he was bad. Okay, that's it. Thank you all for participating in the Philosophy Roulette review. I will one of these days get them up on the website. But I'm trying to get papers